Thank you so much for dialing in today. My name is Minji and I'm delighted to have you all joining us. Today we are taking a deeper dive into navigating the new WGEA legislation targets, how employers are raising the bar. You'll be hearing from Louise Rogers, Gemma Lloyd, and we have a very special guest today, Mary Wooldridge. She's the CEO of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, also known as WGEA, which makes this a fantastic opportunity to have your burning questions answered directly by the leaders from both Work 180 and WGEA. Then we'll do formal introductions in just a moment. But for now, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment for an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the true custodians of the lands on which this meeting is being hosted from and pay our respects to Indigenous elders of the past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. From our team, we have Gemma Lloyd, the CEO and co-founder of Work 180, and Louise Rogers, one of our DEI advisors, whose faces some of you may have seen in our previous webinars. And I'm Minji He, Business Development Representative here at Work 180, and I'll be guiding you through the bits and bobs in today, including the Q&A session at the end. We always aim to create a safe and supportive space in all of our events. So as always, we invite you to engage with curiosity with an open mind. This is a community space and everyone's welcome and every perspective matters. While we are covering a lot of ground, it's important that it feels like a two-way conversation. So please feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat at a session. Now,
is there a connection issue? Yeah, I might just pick up for a minute. So in terms of creating a safe and supportive space, we'd also like you to raise your thoughts or drop a note in the chat at the site throughout. We will keep the questions to the end though, so if they don't get answered immediately, don't worry, they will be answered at the end. And keep it flowing. There might be some conversations that require sort of a deeper dive, so we'll let you know what we can cover and what we can't. Louise, can I pass to you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Hi all. As Minji noted, I'm Louise. I'm one of the DEI advisors. And to give you a bit of an overview in terms of what we're going to cover today, we'll be getting a bit of an industry update from Work 180 before we pass to the wonderful WGEA to hear more from them. We'll also talk through a little bit more of a roadmap to success and what meaningful targets can actually look like and how some of our endorsed employers are already raising the bar. And as always, we'll have an opportunity for a bit of a Q&A. So encourage you, as you have comments, questions, and insights throughout the session today, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll dedicate time at the end of today's session to address them. But that's it for our agenda today. So now I'd love to pass over to Gemma Lloyd for a bit more of an industry update.
Thank you so much, Louise. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. This is our second webinar in the series, so I know that some of you would have attended the first. There is a small amount of crossover from the first session, but we've really aimed to sort of add more to that first with some more practical examples of how employers are achieving targets, as well as, of course, our special guest, Mary Wooldridge, who I'll be introducing shortly. Now, what we hope that you're going to take away today is really these three key areas. So the first is how critical it is to start your journey early and set your organisation up for success. So doing the work now will lay critical groundwork for reaping sustainable change. The second is to really embrace this as an opportunity to lead the way, not to see it as a compliance tick box exercise, but these targets can be an opportunity to facilitate meaningful change that is authentic and tailored to your organisation and how you do business. And last but not least, you don't need to do this alone. So I've got a couple of examples and slides to show you the strong results that Work 180 endorsed employers are achieving through focus and through a collaboration. So in an industry defined by good intentions, we drive measurable, actionable change. So understanding what to focus on and measuring the progress can often be the most difficult part. The process that we've developed is through studying our most successful endorsed employers. And when I say successful, it's really around that increased gender representation, which incorporates both attraction, promotion, and also retention. And what you can see in this chart is just some of the industries, the average increased representation per year since 2020 per employer is in the green. That's the national average. And then you can see the Work 180 best practice for our endorsed employers. And, you know, an example like tech, for instance, the average increase is 0.5% across the Australia's national average, whereas Work 180's best practice is at 6%. And when it comes to being endorsed employer, I know that we have many endorsed employers on the call today, and we're going to put a link in the chat now as well so that you can see if you're eligible to become endorsed employer. But what it means is that you've met a minimum set of standards, and then you can join our platform, which has over 1.5 million women using the platform every year to research and find their next employer and apply for available job opportunities. So if we go to the next slide, being an endorsed employer really puts you ahead. It means, like I mentioned, you've met a set of minimum standards, and 40% of Australian workplaces do not meet those minimum standards. But it also means on average you have a lower pay gap than your non-endorsed counterparts. And on average you have increased representation of women compared to your non-endorsed counterparts. So many of you will be familiar with our endorsement and the platform offering that we have, but we also have our DEI advisory arm, of which Louise is a strong part of that, which offers workshops, consulting, and advisory services. And on the next slide, I just wanted to touch on what our values are when we partner with workplaces. So when we partner with you, we lead with courage and empathy. We offer remedies, not ridicule. We're very much focused on progress over perfection, recognizing that every employer has a unique context and that you're at a different stage of your journey. We speak truths, not jargon. So it's all about being really practical with the approaches. And we do it with grit, acknowledging that this work is challenging. And then when it comes to supporting employers to lead on the gender equity targets with WGEA, we provide DEI leads with the tools, the language, the evidence needed to secure executive backing, ensuring that initiatives have the support required for success. We collaborate with you to ensure that we're combining global best practice with local Australian context and help your organisation not just meet the WGEA requirements, but also establish genuinely inclusive cultures that drive business performance. And one of the things I really appreciate about these WGEA targets is that they're across the 3-year timeline, because this really acknowledges that meaningful transformation requires a sustained effort, not just a one-off tick box. We also apply an intersectional lens, so our methodology spotlight race, disability, and caregiving status alongside gender, ensuring that no one's left behind. And last but not least, we proactively prepare organisations with training and messaging that anticipates and effectively addresses any internal resistance. So we really want to ensure that this is not seen as just a tick box compliance activity, but as a real opportunity to make the business better. Now, it's without further ado that I'm going to introduce Mary Wooldridge, who is the CEO of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. So Mary leads the gender equality, is in driving gender equality in workplaces, ensuring that women and men are equally represented, valued, and rewarded. Mary brings to the role a wealth of experience from a distinguished career in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. And Mary served from 2006 to 2020 in the Victorian Parliament, including a term as the Minister for Mental Health, Community Services and Women's Affairs. As Minister, Mary worked to implement the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Their Children 2010 to 2022, and was instrumental in establishing Our Watch, the National Family Violence Prevention Agency. So Mary has a wealth of accolades and experience, and I'm delighted to hand over to Mary now to talk through this legislation.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Gemma. And it's great to be with you and the Work 180 team. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in your webinar as well with all of your endorsed employers and others as well. I've got about 10 minutes just to take you through some of who's WGEA, some specifics about the targets, and obviously looking forward to the Q&A and specifics, that concerns that people might have, or questions and so on. So first of all, and I think Louise is working the slides, just a little bit about WGEA. So who are we? What do we do? And look, many of you are already reporting to us and are familiar, but for those on the call who aren't, every employer with 100 or more employees in Australia is required to report to us every year on 6 gender equality indicators. And what that results in is about 5.4 million employees are covered by reporting. And that's from nearly 8,000 employers across all industries, of course. There's a number of things that we do, and reporting has been a real catalyst for understanding and knowledge and information and benchmarking. But there's a number of other things we do as well as the reporting process, which includes recent legislative reforms to enable us to publish individual employer gender pay gaps, and having a look at what that means and adding that transparency and accountability to performance, and also building capability. And I think as you do with Work 180, providing support for employers to be able to accelerate change on gender equality in their workplaces. And I think the different support and aspects and our different roles are quite complementary in terms of what you do and WGEA's role as a government regulator and catalyst for change. So Louise, we'll go into the next slide and just talk about targets specifically. And let me take you through just the framework and how it was determined. First of all, it applies to large employers, and so they're called designated relevant employers. And it's if you directly employ 500 or more employees. The directly is important because it actually puts in context that setting targets for corporate groups, which may be quite diversified, was determined to be not a relevant or meaningful process. So the corporate group as a whole doesn't set targets, but the individual employers with 500 or more employees within it will be required to do so. People will know from WGEA reporting that we determine an employer by ABNs. And so it relates to the ABN reporting structure that you currently have, but not at corporate groups. So I just want to reassure people on that front. It results in about 2,000 employers who will have to set targets starting next year, and employing over 4 million Australians. And that threshold of 500 was important because while it covers about a quarter of all employers that report to us, it covers 3/4 of employees. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't add a significant regulatory burden for medium and small employers, but that we did get the breadth of coverage in terms of the employees who are covered by the target setting and obviously the resulting, hopefully, impact and acceleration of change. So what is required is starting for reporting next year in 2026, employers must select and commit to achieve 3 gender equality targets, and at least one of them must be numeric. And then what's selected will be published on our Data Explorer, which is this, hopefully people know the Data Explorer, but if you don't, please go. It's where all the employer and industry results are published. So the selection will be published on the Data Explorer. And employers then have 3 years from the selection year to meet or demonstrate improvement against each of the targets that have been selected. Now that block at the bottom in terms of your presentation, so the reporting that's been done this year is your baseline year. You'll select targets for the first time next year in reporting. You then have through till 2029, when you report to WGEA, that's when the assessment will be done as to whether those targets have been met or improved upon at least. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the timeline that the baseline year has already been set against which targets will be assessed. So in terms of the next slide, the reason this has been done is because there was a review of our Act, and what it showed is that while there'd been significant progress, progress had stalled, and that we needed to take the next step. And the two big recommendations out of that was, one, that we publish employer gender pay gaps, which we've already started doing. And the second was that large companies are required to set and meet targets. And so it goes beyond that reporting to actually now requiring large employers to make progress and to improve. And lots of other countries have a requirement around action plans, and even the Victorian government requires that for the Victorian public sector. But the assessment was we wanted to go further than that, because action plans are all well and good. What we actually want to track is outcomes. And we know that targets work. The evidence shows that targets work. So that's why, an action plan is a very useful part of the process, and actually an essential part of the process, but actually it's about delivering those outcomes and delivering that change that we're all seeking. So on to the next slide. Target setting is not new, and many companies, not most companies, use target setting as in parts of their business. It might be financial performance, it might be things around production levels, those sorts of things. But many companies also use gender equality targets as part of their business. And in fact, of the large companies, 56% are already setting at least one internal target in relation to gender equality. And we assessed that 1 in 3, about a third, are actually already setting targets against the things that the targets menu contains already. So this should be familiar. And this is just a little representation here of a couple of the key industries to give you an idea of many are already, and that's that orange block in the middle, setting 3 or more targets against these areas of gender equality. So good progress, but now there's an accountability in relation to the performance. So what's on the target menu is on the next slide. And there's 19 different options on the target menu, and they're structured, as you can see, against each of those gender equality indicators, which are where we measure, the things that affect gender equality performance and can be inhibitors and limiters. So the idea is that rather than the legislation requiring a reduction in the gender pay gap or a change in composition, that it has been designed that employers can select the targets dependent on their own maturity and where they're at in their own gender equality journey. And there's a combination of them. Some of them are numeric, such as increase the representation of managers or non-managers, reduce your gender pay gap. And some are action-based, which are more about what policies you have in place, such as, if you don't have an employer-funded parental leave, put one into place, and that can be a target. So at least one of the targets has to be numeric, i.e. that it actually delivers that outcome. But often what we find is that the numeric target, the action targets support the achievement of the numeric target in the process. And so, as I say, 19 different options covering, and within each of these, sometimes there's multiple choices. So, for example, under reduce your gender pay gap, it could be that you choose the base salary gender pay gap or the total REM. It could be the median or the average. In terms of non-managers, it could be that you target your sales force and your sales professionals. It could be that you target your clerical and administrative staff. So there are choices within the targets as well as the 19 overall ones that you can choose. So just to the last slide to sort of sum up in terms of the context is the reason the targets on the menu are there is because they're backed by evidence of things that work to accelerate change. And they also align to information that employers are already reporting to WGEA. So what we didn't want to do is add additional reporting burden. What we wanted to do is that effort to be put into driving change within individual employers. So, there would have been some targets we would have ideally selected if we weren't limited by that, but we had to make sure that reporting and what's already being reported frames the choices that people can make. What that also means, though, is that you can't choose other targets. The targets are specified, the categories are specified, and they're consistent with WGEA reporting. Sometimes we get asked is, why can't we pick a subset of our workforce or our sales force or whatever? Well, you don't report that information to WGEA currently, so there's no ability for WGEA to be able to assess your achievement and performance against them. So for numeric targets, it will be nominating a percentage point improvement that you're committing to achieve. For action targets, it's actually about taking your existing policies and saying what additional new entitlements are going to be provided against those policies. And as I've said, action targets can help you achieve your numeric targets. In terms of 3 years down the track then, of course, we will be assessing whether employers have met or made progress on those targets against their baseline. And what's nominated here will then be assessed in 3 years' time about whether when you report in 2029, you say that you are now doing that. There's 2 ways that that employers can be non-compliant. One, if they don't select targets next year, and in 3 years' time, if they haven't met or made progress against the targets that they selected. So that's the process from there. And just finally, to finish up on the last slide, in addition to the support that Work 180 is providing, WGEA provides a lot of information. Lloyd, if you can swap to the next slide, thank you. On our website, we've got a targets hub. So all things target at wgea.gov.au/targets. There's the target menu, there's a guide to selection, there's lots of FAQs, and we continue to update them as we get more questions if we haven't answered them already, because if you've got a question, probably another 10 or 20 or 30 people do too. We do provide a guide on how you find your baseline and whether you're eligible to select those targets. There's an overall compliance strategy, which includes an element about targets, but also some masterclasses, advisory sessions, and those sorts of things. The main thing I'd suggest is also follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter. So as resources come online, we will continue to update through those sources what's new, what's around, what further information is available for you. So I'm going to finish up there and hand back to the team and look forward to questions and discussion.
Thanks so much, Mary. It's fantastic to kind of peel back the curtain as to who WGEA really is and why the legislation changes have been made. Again, I'm Louise and I'm one of the D&I advisors in the Work 180 team. Oh, all is well. Sorry, I think Zoom feedback just gave me a little extra spice this afternoon, so that's all good. But yeah, I'm here to guide you through the Work 180 roadmap and acknowledging now the nuts and bolts of what the new targets need to be. Let's talk through some of the ways that this can look like day to day at organisations, including our endorsed employers. And we'll do this by taking you through our step-by-step roadmap from assessing your current position, talking through what it can look like to identify meaningful targets, and then moving through again, what it can look like to develop those practical strategies and seek to improve, monitor, and review throughout the 3-year reporting cycle and beyond. Now, first things first, starting at the start, really encourage you to assess your current position. Our initial phase is all about understanding the current state of gender equality within your organisation and laying groundwork, hopefully, for meaningful change. We want to understand how inclusion is embedded as part of your organisational approach, how it can align with your organisational mission and strategy, and ensuring it aligns with where you're going as an organisation. To this point too, we also want to establish that leadership awareness and commitment. Are leadership aware that legislation changes have occurred? Are they aware of their accountability and responsibilities? Have we had an opportunity to facilitate a comprehensive gender pay gap analysis? Often we capture many different types of data. Are we harnessing and utilising that? Are we aware of what we're capturing and how we can use it? And also conducting policy and procedure review. It might not sound so exciting, but it is critical to understand what messaging is out there and why. What supports are out there in that policy and procedure format, and what may be an opportunity to update, refresh, and continue to push. Now, An example of an endorsed employer who is really striving to raise the bar and has been living out some of these actions is Stantec. And for context, Stantec are a global leader in sustainable engineering, design and environmental consulting, and they've also been an endorsed employer since 2021. Now, Stantec have engaged with year-on-year DEI benchmarking, using tools such as Work180's DEI benchmarking assessment, which you'll get a bit of a peek of what this looks like a little bit later this afternoon, to kind of analyse organisational position against 10 key inclusion areas to compare the organisation with itself over time, but also against key competitors, industry and nationally. And to further kind of add nuance and perspective to the data captured, a lot of the quantitative data captured, Stantec also sought to raise the bar in championing employee voice so we can get a really holistic view of assessing that current position within the organisation. And this included a collaboration with Work180 this year on a variety of focus groups that engaged women across the organisation at a variety of career levels in different departments to take a deeper dive and better understand employee experience. And this type of activity really allows us to better understand your current state and inform then how we can best progress inclusion in a way that strategically makes sense. So hopefully that brings to life some of those activities and concepts that we talk about. Want to move to step 2, the path to identifying meaningful targets. So with a clear understanding, hopefully, of those challenges and opportunities in the organisational landscape, the focus now shifts to developing a comprehensive strategy and also setting ambitious yet achievable targets. So again, we want to ensure we're developing that holistic and strategic approach to gender equality. Do we have a defined and clear vision and objectives? Does this align with our business goals? Have we also consulted, again, off the back of what Mary mentioned, our targets menu? Perhaps in assessing our current state, we see themes coming out that are similar across our 6 key areas from which we can choose targets. And this is starting to point us in the direction of what may be an appropriate path or target area for our targets. And of course, having conversations, really open discussions about defining financial investment and resource allocation. Having these conversations early and upfront can make all the difference in ensuring you do have the allocated, dedicated resources and budgets to actually facilitate your targets, which of course is incredibly necessary over that 3-year reporting period. Now, this is a non-WGEA specific example, but I still think it's really important to share with you. So an endorsed employer that demonstrates some of the concepts that we've just mentioned and how we can kind of strive to meet targets with these practical actions is Urban Utilities. So every day, bit of context, Urban Utilities helps over 1.5 million customers across southeastern Queensland access world-class water and wastewater services, and they've also been an endorsed employer since 2023. So perhaps if you are dialing in from Queensland, maybe your lovely water bottle or cup of water next to you is thanks to Urban Utilities. But Urban Utilities are very much striving to embed a culture of continuous improvement. And an example of this is through the collaboration with Work180 to elevate how organisational EVP, so that employee value proposition, is showcased. Leveraging that status as an endorsed employer and using this strategically in the recruitment process to drive more targeted and intentional visibility to female job seekers. Now, other activities Urban Utilities facilitated also included honing in on the strategic approach to inclusion. And at that time for the organisation, it meant standing up a disability inclusion action plan, so important to take an intersectional approach. And it also meant committing to the resourcing required to enhance organisational EVP. So for example, the provision of an 18-week parental leave policy and provision on super on 12 months of unpaid parental leave. So in this way, Urban Utilities engaged with those key steps in identifying meaningful targets, and noting this is a non-WGEA scenario, however, shows those key concepts that we talk about, like developing that strategic approach, having that strategic plan or framework, being clear about resource allocation and acknowledging perhaps where can we raise the bar, for example, extending those employee benefits, and being critical and thinking about the why of what this integrates with how we do business. And we know there's a variety of short, medium, long-term benefits to reap from this, and Urban Utilities saw that increase in hiring women in those frontline roles after enacting the activities we've touched on. Now, and it's great to see comments and questions flying through in the chat as well, which is fantastic. Rest assured, we'll have lots of time to get into the nuts and bolts of them in our Q&A. Now, coming to our step 3 and step 4, firstly, developing those practical strategies. Now, of course, we want to strive to build inclusion into our business as usual. We don't want inclusion to be another thing at the end of a long list. We really want it to be built into your organization's DNA. Communications, messaging, is it clear what our target is, the why behind it, and how we're going to get there? Are we breaking down communications into what does this really mean for me, for whoever's going to be consuming those communications? And it's also really important that we have those ongoing touch points to increase knowledge, awareness, and also build capabilities that might be required to fulfill organizational needs and facilitate those targets. So looking at that holistically can be really critical. And of course, our measurement frameworks and ongoing reporting. Of course, we have our mandatory reporting, and part of that's public and part of that's inter-organization. But I encourage you to think about how else do we track, monitor, and communicate throughout that 3-year reporting cycle and beyond. How do we continue to check in, refresh, and track trends? And we know the momentum often builds through the 3-year reporting period. And monitoring this can be all the more important, considering how reporting and tracking can be a bit of a puzzle piece in progressing inclusion, capturing when maybe things aren't going the way we want them to, or even exceeding where we hoped they would. Now, I want to share a final example of an endorsed employer seeing impact, and that's AngloGold Ashanti. So AngloGold Ashanti are a global mining company with varied and high quality portfolio in gold and other metals in operations and projects. And they've also been an endorsed employer with us since 2021. Now, AngloGold really have been striving to progress inclusion and increase representation of women across their organization. One focus area of this includes striving to increase the representation of women entering the organisation, including through apprenticeship programs. And to give you a bit of a bird's eye view of some of the activities AngloGold facilitated with Work 180, was understanding their current position, using tools such as that DEI benchmarking assessment, talking through job adverts, recruitment processes, and current communications and employer branding, including how do we talk about that EVP. Building inclusive hiring capabilities in teams, including through training and competency building. And again, identifying that increased representation of women as a goal, a target, and a need in the organization, and communicating that clearly. Now, we were able to move the dial through facilitating these actions. And one of the results this endorsed employer experienced is that significant increase in the percentage of women applicants in the apprenticeship program, of course, striving for that to flow on through into employees generally joining and also being retained within the organisation. Now, I appreciate we have thrown a lot of content at you this afternoon, and I know many of you have questions. We'll be getting to them very shortly. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do want to run through a few key items that if you were to dial out of our session today, what could I do? What's the next step that I could take? Now, off the bat, I know we do have some endorsed employers on the call. If you are already an endorsed employer, I would really encourage you to leverage your Work 180 DEI benchmarking assessment. You can update it in the Progress Hub, and we can also support you in a deeper dive session. If you're new to the world of Work 180, we also have an opportunity for you to book in some time with Gemma for an exclusive discovery session where you can talk through the opportunity to gain tools such as our benchmarking assessment, and you'll be able to do that via a QR code and link we'll share at the end of our session today. To give you a bit of more of a peek behind the curtain, this is kind of the tip of an iceberg in terms of what DEI benchmarking can look like in terms of your assessment against 10 key inclusion areas, assessing against a foundational, progressing, or pace-setting level, and some of the contextual data we can also compare and contrast to in terms of average endorsed employer, but more broadly, both industry and national data where it makes sense to support you. Now, other key activities I would really encourage you to engage with are, again, review those policies and procedures. Do an audit of what is out there, where is it, what is our messaging, and is it clear? What do we want that to be? Facilitate that gender pay gap analysis. Consider those different data sources you may be capturing. How can we leverage that to have a really holistic and intersectional pay gap analysis? And also raising that awareness and understanding with leadership. Are leaders and organizations really aware of legislation change? Is it on the agenda, for example, to discuss at your next board meeting? Having these discussions now are really critical to set us up for success over the next 3 years and beyond. Now, I would love to pass to Gemma, who will just have a quick word before we move to our Q&A.
Thank you so much. And sorry, Kylie Cashin's comments just caught our eye. We love you too, Kylie. Thank you so much, Mary and Louise, for running through that. I think it was great to get that deep dive into the targets that you can be setting with Mary and the why around it. And Louise, those practical examples are really helpful. My main takeaway with all of this is to make sure that your targets are meaningful to your workplace, that this isn't seen as just a compliance tick box activity, conducting things like employee focus groups so that you're aligning the targets with what your workforce actually needs, as well as your business strategy. And getting started early is a key to setting the right types of targets, and that'll set you up for success in leading the way.